sisters and comrades. It's good to have you back, and we do need to start. Anyone who dares to look at the program will see that this should be starting at something like somewhere after 3, and equally you will see that it's now 10 minutes past 5, so we are in trouble time-wise. Our main speaker, has agreed to be economical with the time, and I'm sure he's going to do his usual brilliant job. Our first speaker is the excellent MS Temi Mwale, who's the co-founder of Get Out of the Gang, and we're going to hear from her right now, and she will be speaking for the same time as Dr. Umar Johnson, about half an hour, and we hope to have time for questions at the end of both presentations. Yes.
Thank you very much. Greetings, everybody. First and foremost, thank you for Colette for organising this, bringing us all together. I won't spend too much time thanking everybody. We've given thanks for everybody who's put in work to bring us all together today. So just one more time, thank you to everybody that made this happen. I'm just going to get straight into it because I'm young, I've got a lot to say, and we don't have that much time. So let's start there. The talk is named Youth at the Forefront. It's named Youth at the Forefront for a number of reasons. That can be taken to mean a number of different things. First of all, Youth at the Forefront is, me personally, I'm an advocate for youth-led solutions to our problems, especially problems that are deemed to be youth issues. I feel like there's not enough representation or young people leading movements and leading that change. There needs to be a change there because that's really important. And secondly, you reap what you sow, essentially. So I feel like if we are not investing in the young people today, we can kind of predict with a lot of accuracy that in the next 10 years, we're not really going to see the change that we desire and that we're talking about today. And so we've gathered here clearly to reflect on our history, on our past and our achievements, but we know that we've got, and so I want to primarily talk to you about violence, and I think that's because we need to eradicate the violence that's in our community. We shy around it, we beat around the bush, but there's no time to do that because our young brothers are being killed and some of our young sisters have also been killed, and we just need these people because these are our warriors of the future. These are the people that are going to carry the baton forward. These are the people that are going to take this fight into the next few generations, and without them, we're not going to see that happen. Can I get a show of hands? Who here is under 30? That's really good. Like, I didn't actually expect it to be so many. Who here has heard of Pan-Africanism before today? That's, again, really good. And of those young people, the first people that put their hands up, who was taught Pan-Africanism by their leaders or, their elders in their community, or predominantly by their parents? Far fewer. I'm going to come to that at the end. So, for me, why eradicating the violence in our community should be our first priority. I feel like the relationship between violence and trauma is not really spoken about enough, and we need to understand where the violence is coming from if we're ever going to tackle it effectively. I just want to give you a few personal examples because we suffer from intergenerational trauma. This is something that is known. Not only do we carry that baggage, that weight, that pain of the past, of our ancestors, from slavery and the subsequent oppression that we have faced, but we are also living in traumatic environments day to day, and this is something that needs to be connected with our previous traumatic experiences. So, using my personal examples, I grew up around violence, to say the least, and I'm sure that a lot of people here would have had the same experiences. Not only was that in my own home, witnessing my own father brutalise my mother, I have to say that out here because we need to speak about what's happening in our homes. We've mentioned it many times today. If we don't have our house in order, how can we expect to have our community in order? First things first. But we never really look to further than what's happening in our own household. So I know a lot of young children experience domestic violence in their household, but it's bigger than that. Because when I would go to escape what was happening in my house and I'd go to my friend's house, I'll see the same thing. And people don't really understand how that affects people. So when I'm leaving to try and find a safe haven, one of my best friends in childhood when we were really, really young, her mum's new partner brutalised her on many occasions. Now, she had 4 brothers and sisters. In total, there were 6 of us in that household, and despite the fact that I was not one of their family members, that never prevented this man from putting his hand on this woman. And I would have to recall and make it very visual for you, and I don't like doing that, but there would have been 6 of us sitting on a bed, the door would have been ajar, and this happened on many occasions, and we watched him stump and kick her to within an inch of her life more than once. Every child in that room was under 11, and the youngest was 2. Let me just put that out there. Violence becomes such a normal part of our reality. We become so desensitized to it that we don't actually even recognize that it's going on. I mean, further to that, I remember a game that used to be played on our estate when, you know, the boys would get us in the corridor of the blocks, all the, you know, young girls, and they would barricade the entrances and exits, but before they did that, they threw fireworks in there. We were 11, we had to duck and dive, and literally we did not know if we were going to be safe. I thought I was going to die. That is not a joke. They would let us out, but the fireworks were already bouncing up and down the corridor. Another example, my personal house, there were 6 of us living in a 2-bedroom flat, and so when my youngest sister was born, my mum had to split the living room to make us another bedroom, because clearly there was not enough space for everybody. And so one day, a group of boys from the estate decided that they were going to chuck a brick through our living room window, but it wasn't a living room, it was a bedroom, and it came this close to hitting my little sister as she slept in her cot. Of course, my little sister's dad could not contain himself. When he went out there to, you know, confront these young men who had done that, they then proceeded to try and, you know, force their entry into the house. And when they weren't successful at doing that, they tried to put fireworks through the letterbox. These are the kinds of environments that we grow up in. Another show of hands. Who has experienced similar things, domestic violence, other kinds of traumatic violence that's happening where you live? To be fair, sometimes we don't want to be open and honest about that, but I do think that is more than who just admitted to that right there. That's just my opinion. These are just a handful of stories I chose to share with you today, and I could have chosen to share any more, you know, a lot more, but I will just say, don't use my stories, these are my examples, just reflect on your own personal examples, which prove the point that we live in very traumatic environments. How do you expect young people to come through those environments and grow into adults and not exhibit any kind of violence at all? We are not taught how to adequately address our feelings and emotions. We are not taught emotional intelligence. And actually, as a people, we've been told, you know, we're strong. We've suffered for years. We've suffered for hundreds of years. We can cope. We know how to do this. But we don't really know how to do this. And what people do is they suppress it. They build their own coping mechanisms. I mean, Viv, who spoke before me, gave some really, you know, traumatic, you know, examples of what he had been through. And I think one thing that really caught my attention when he said that is that we suppress those things, and sometimes they might become triggered at later stages, but ultimately, as an adult, if you have not dealt with the trauma in your childhood, the trauma that has led you into adulthood and formed the way you behave as an adult, how can you expect your children to do the same? They're not going to, because they're not being taught how to do that. So, I first heard about knife crime when I was 10 years old, and that was when I was applying to secondary school, and a young man named Kyan Prince was stabbed outside the school that I went on to attend. At that age, he was 15, and I thought, you know, wow, I couldn't really appreciate the tender age that he had, because I was only 10, and to me 15 seemed like quite old. When I got to 15, I thought, if I was killed today, I have not done nothing with my life, and he was so young, how could he have been taken away from us in this cruel and, extremely violent way? It was also when I was 15 that, again, somebody that was close to me that I actually knew this time, and my childhood friend and my next door neighbour, Marvin Henry, he was shot and killed a month before his 18th birthday. And again, when I got to 17, a month before my 18th birthday, I thought, wow, Marvin was really, really young when this happened to him. Why am I bringing this up? I don't need to relate to you the figures. I could just ask, who knows someone who's been killed as a result of knife or gun crime? In this audience, who knows somebody? Who knows somebody who's in prison for committing an act of knife or gun crime? Okay. So we cannot really ignore the disproportionate effects that these crimes have on our particular community. I feel like people shy away from this because, from the oppressors, it's used to justify, their racism, because black people are just inherently more violent and all of that rubbish that we don't believe, but it leads us not to speak about what's really going on. Black people are not inherently more violent, but traumatized people are violent. That's the distinction that has to be made. And that we cannot become complacent when holding the police to account for their racial stereotyping, but I'm so sick and tired of us ignoring the fact that we have internalized white people's supremacist ideas and their view of our young black children, and we've internalized that to the point that our young black boys are more scared of each other than anybody else. They perceive each other as a threat, and that is why the violence is happening in our community, because we've internalized that. And so, I set up Get Out of the Gang when I was 16. We now provide 5 key services. I won't go into all the depths of the methods that we're using to tackle the violence, because if you're interested in that, you will come and speak to me at the end and find out exactly what we are doing. But we need help. That's the first thing. I believe that, as I said at the beginning, young people need to be leading these initiatives. That doesn't mean that there's not a place for our elders. There is, and I'm going to come on to that. All the elders in the room, you're going to get it from me, because I feel like I had to find my way on my own, and that should not have been the case. That's what I want to make clear. Another major problem in our community is egos. They've been mentioned on the panel a few times already. This kind of hero and saviour complex that is very white supremacist in nature has been further internalized by our own people. We want to be the individual to eradicate violence in our community. We want to be the individual to bring economic stability to our community. It doesn't work that way. Those egos take up too much space, energy and effort, which could be much better placed actually tackling the issues at hand than promoting people's own egos and agendas. I've heard some in the room today, I'll not name any names. What's important is when we move forward today, we have to understand that egos have no place, especially in this movement. That is a teaching of Pan-Africanism, unity, but with those egos, we cannot achieve that. So the egos need to go. When I first set up Get Out of the Gang, I had also taken from examples of my elders, and I thought I was going to be the one. I was going to be the one to change the violence in my community. Now, I'm so glad that I was allowed to get rid of that ego much before I was, to progress into further adulthood, because I'm only 19. But now, my goal and objective is to tackle this violence as the primary issue, because we cannot achieve any other type of unity if our people are killing each other. It's just not going to happen. And so, I don't really care how we reach those goals. I'm trying to use as many platforms and forums to have that impact and to challenge and tackle that violence, because that is the essential thing. So if you were to read the programme, you would have also seen that I've had quite a lot of involvement with the Justice for Mark Dudley campaign in London. And when we were doing that campaign, we realised that we kind of had to separate the legal campaign for justice from the state with the other issues that were coming to light about the people in Haringey and how they live and all the other ways that they are oppressed, which is obviously, deaths in police custody fitted into that because, Tottenham in particular has had a lot of deaths by police. So it wasn't really going to help us, though, that legal campaign tackling those kind of social issues. So Mark Duggan's good friends, who are now kind of in their early 30s, they've come forward, and because I've been working with them through the campaign, we're going to set up a charity. When I say we, I'm taking a backseat, I'm going to advise, given the kind of experiences that I've had setting up my organisation, and I'm going to become a trustee and sit at the back and just help to guide them, because I believe in localism. I believe that these young people in their environments, if they do not see you and know you and you're not part of their everyday reality, why are they going to listen to you? They're not. The best methods are when we live and work in our same community, but I feel like the reason we're not having as much impact doing that is because we haven't dealt with this trauma, because it can become very draining and traumatic to live and work in the same community. But we take that over letting external people come in, tell us how we need to do it, and try and do it for us, because the young people are not going to listen to them. So it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, and the young people feel further marginalised and frustrated because every type of intervention they have with somebody external does not work. And that makes it much more difficult when we go in from the community and try and have that impact that we want to actually have it. Because they're very sceptical. They've had a lot of people come to them telling them they're going to offer them these things and change their lives and change their experiences, but they haven't been able to deliver. There's a very good reason for that. I personally am very sick and tired of chasing for funding. I'm not doing it anymore. No, but we can't do it because we know that it's not in their interest for this issue to end. They don't care if our children are killed and gunned down on the streets. They might show a little bit of care when it spills over into their communities. I remember in 2008 in London, 28 young people, that's only under 18s, were stabbed or shot in 1 year. Out of those 28, 3 of them were white, and the Sun newspaper said, you know, knife crime, with the 3 faces of the white people, because that's when it matters to them, when it crosses over. But when it doesn't, we're going to be left to our own devices. We are told that we can apply for this pot of money, and this pot of money, and this pot of money. This does not happen overnight. And as long as we look at it for what it really is, which is the trauma, and dealing with that, and dealing with the mindset, I don't like using the term gang. I'm going to come on to why I think that's really wrong. And it's kind of, it's funny because my organisation is called Get Out of the Gang. I was 16 when I set that up, and thankfully I'm not as naive as when I first did that, but now it's a brand, and so we roll with it. But in the near future, we will be changing that to practice what we preach, because I do not agree with the terminology. And so, this idea of localism, we have to think global and act local. That means we have to have a global strategy that we implement locally. If we are not in tune with what's happening all over the world, because this issue of violence is not just one, you know, people will love to say, oh, but it's different in London to Manchester, you know. Yes, there are small things that are different depending on exactly the location, and that's where the localism comes in. But in order to have the, you know, overarchingly, the violence is based on the trauma, and so that needs to be addressed. Wherever in the world, black people, young black boys and girls are killing each other, that needs to be addressed as first and foremost, right? And so I think the broader issue is that for a long time we have relied on the state to provide us the money to do this. I just want to let you think about this. I mean, in the UK, we have, in London alone, the Met, we have their Trident task force. I know every borough council has a gangs team and a sub-gangs division and a task force and all the bureaucracy. I won't even name all the organisations because it doesn't really matter. So many people's wages depend on how young boys killing each other that they are not going to let that go. Furthermore, that's only at a small scale, right? The broader picture is that we have seen a direct continuation from slavery because our young black boys are still commodities. They are, because of what has already been mentioned, the prison industrial complex means that, yes, it is more profitable for them to be in prison, but I would say, you know, it's funny because I study law, and in my human rights class a few weeks ago, you know, it was the introductory session to this human rights civil liberties course I'm taking in law, and so the teacher said, you know, you rarely get an opportunity to look at, you know, the human rights articles in their full form and just question, like, why are they like that? Is anything missing? Rare. So article number 3, which is against slavery and forced servitude and labour, it says that, you know, there's exceptions. It's not an absolute right, and it can be justified if it's, you know, if you're subject to correctional facilities, if that's the punishment that's been afforded to you. Good and well over there alone, but when you mix private business with a state complex that's supposed to be a prison system, it's no longer about punishment, it's about economics. And racism has always been economic. Slavery was economic, the private prison industry today is economic, and that's why it puts us in a difficult position, because we know that there has to be consequences for our actions, but how can we sell our young people to you? Because that's what we're doing if we snake on them and tell them and put them in prison. The other effects of that means we as a black community are not trying to talk to the police about what's happening. We want to resolve it in our own community. Because we don't have the structures and things in place to actually do that, that's why the violence is further perpetuated, because now the young people have internalized that if they want to deal with the violence, they're not going to the police. There's codes, you know, on the street, there's rules and laws, and snitching is not one of them, and so we're going to deal with it ourselves. That is why the violence has perpetuated so much, because this system has to change. But how can it change if the police and the prison system continue to operate in the way they do? You know, these are things we need to think practically about. It's all good putting it out there, I'm just saying it, but I don't have the solution to that. That's something we definitely need to think about. Again, with the trauma, mental health is a real taboo in our community. It really is. And it's part of what I just said before about how we've been told that we're strong as a people because we've endured so much, and therefore, why are you going to somebody else to solve your problems, please? That's what some families will say if somebody, you know, is experiencing things. Mental health is out of your control. Mental health is developed, you know, let me not go into it because I'm not a professional, but from my personal experience, I know that it's childhood trauma that develops certain mental health issues in your early adulthood. And so, first of all, let me just say, with the cuts and everything, the mental health institutions in this country are not fit for purpose, and I know why it's a taboo in our community, because the black community does not have a good relationship with the Mental Health Institute. It was another way that we have been oppressed over the years, correct? So what are we going to do then? Because the mental health doesn't go away, but we don't have that institution to rely on. You know, the institution is not even equipped to deal with an individual's mental health. So how can we deal with community mental health, community trauma, intergenerational trauma, these things that have developed when a lot of people who are suffering from the same things in their own personal lives live in one community and have to take the energy, the traumatic energy from each other and try and share that burden, but it becomes very, very overwhelming. And so, as a youth worker, I never feel comfortable signposting any of my young people to the NHS or mental health services because they're not fit for purpose. But then what are we going to do about it? To economics, because I think this is in tune with the funding and everything else. As a young person, you know, Viv and Lee touched very heavily on a lot of the things I wanted to talk about today, but I feel like, as a young person, you need to hear it from my mouth representing the young people. If we had our institutions, our economic stability, we would not have to rely on the NHS to sort out our mental health issues and our trauma, because we would be able to privately fund that. I mean, in America, there's more of a culture of kind of therapists and stuff than we see really in the UK. But if we are not able to fund that ourselves and to do it in our own way, because we already know that we can't rely on the institutions that are going to be, you know, they're institutionally racist. So we need private therapists, you know, cognitive behavioural therapists and all the rest of it to really deal with what's going on. But that costs a lot of money.
African-centred therapists. African-centred therapists.
No, yeah, you're exactly right, because it has to address our culture and our unique position. I take that, very correct. But we don't, where's the money to pay for that? And I feel like a lot of the time we come to these kind of things and we know, yeah, we need to create more economic stability and have our own economic stability as a people. But I don't know how many events I've been to and I've heard that, but where is the communal pot? I don't see one, and after every single event, I have never seen one being put in place. But after this event, I think it would be a good resolution if one is. As Lee said earlier, when he was growing up, he had access to that pot. We pay our dues, we pay a small amount. I don't want to hear, oh, but we're all struggling. Exactly, we are all struggling, which means it's going to be more effective if we put in our little bit of change per week, and then we can access that when we need to. And so, as I said, this is going to be a long process, and I've only ever received funding to do very, very short-term work. And they pit you against each other, and they'll be like, oh, well, you know, we don't have enough money for you to do. Why can't you just do it for 6 months? Because how am I going to address 400 years of trauma in 6 months? I'm not going to be able to do that. It's just foolish. But then we have to know why they want that, because, as I said before, it's not in their interest for this to ever finish. Now, further to that, I think the media need to address that. The media uses language, and I feel like because we're reliant on the state's money, we accept their language, we accept their terminology, and this is what I was saying about the term gang. We accept the notion of gang, this idea of gangs, which is very racialized, because we want their money. And when their money and their funding criteria says you need to tackle gangs, we're going to use the term gangs. And now, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but if you're from the sector and you know you apply for funding, you'll notice that there's been a very quick shift to now use the overarching term of radicalization and to tackle gangs and extremism all under one banner. We can see very clearly what they're doing with that. Just be very mindful of that. I don't think it's actually safe or in our best interest to continue relying on these sources of funding, but we will have to do that until we have our own pots of money, because otherwise the work will just not get done at all, and it's too important not to do. Which means right now, we need to set up that economic institution. There's no time to wait. We need our own banks, we need our own economic, you know, so we can divest that to where it needs to go, the organisations where it's in our interests. And the media, further to that, I mean, who went on the reparations march this year? Anyone go? Who saw it on the news? Oh, you saw it on the news? What news reported it? I'd love to know. No, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. No, I didn't think you saw it on the news because I didn't think it was on the news. My point is that we continue relying on their media platforms when we know that they don't promote us in a good light. We know that they don't promote our things when we are coming together. The Million Man March wasn't on there. Of course it wasn't going to be on there. When would they put hundreds of thousands of black people coming together and not acting violent? That's not in their interest. But we have to understand that it's not just about us condoning their media, it's what happens with that. Because research conducted by Cardiff University showed that over 70% of stories that are about young black men are about crime. 70%. That is obviously higher than their, you know, first of all, let me say, for males in general, it was higher. But between the, you know, the disproportionality between the white males and the black males, 70%, 40%. of overall stories. And so, how can we expect our young black men not to internalize that when the only thing they see is that in the media and we do not do anything to challenge it? We don't do anything to challenge it. We know the media's not in our interest. It's time to create our own. I'm so glad that Nubian Times is here, but it's more about supporting those groups when we know there are, show that there's demand for them, stop buying other kind of media outlets because they're not promoting our issues. And further to that, let me come on to music. It was mentioned briefly, but I really want to go into this in quite some depth because, recently I watched a TED Talk. Off the top of my head, I really can't remember who it was by, but it was about the fact that black murder is acceptable. Yes, it is, because you never turn on a radio station and hear any music about Turkish people killing each other, or about Asian people killing each other. But when we turn on the radio station and we hear black people killing each other, that's normal. And when we promote that lifestyle, of course, our young people are going to internalize it. People say, oh, but our creative arts and hip-hop, and we come through and we use our music. If you make music that promotes black people harming one another, I'm not going to support it. I will not buy it. I will not watch it. But you guys all have to make that same commitment. And you have to tell the young people why they can't be listening to music that in every other sentence uses the N-word, and why they think that they can now, it's appropriation and it's a term of endearment. No, it is not. But I personally, it was only a few years ago I made the conscious decision to stop using that term. And I feel like young people don't really understand that, but there needs to be more from our elders helping us to understand why we can never use that word in any positive light. There's nothing positive about that word. It is not a term of endearment. And actually, we don't own the music industry. No, we do not. And so we know there's an agenda there, because if our young people want to make it in the music industry, they are forced to make this type of music, because that's the music that sells. That's what they are told. So how come, because we don't buy conscious music, because that's not in the mainstream, young people are never going to make that type of music. Young people will continue listening to this harmful music, which I know is damaging to the psyche. When I was 17 and I just set up Get Outta The Gang, I remember being in sixth form and Chief Keef's song had just come out. He was a bit younger than me actually, even more funnily. And I won't even say any of the lyrics of that song, but if you know Chief Keef, you'll know that there's only a certain type of thing he could be talking about. And I remember going into one of my teacher's offices and being, I'm so excited, I'm going to see Chief Keef at the O2. And he just sat me down and said, why? Why are you excited about that? That's surely very hypocritical given the work that you're doing. And I said, oh no, but we can separate that out, that's just music, this is real life. He said, but you stand against violence against your young people, so why would you listen to somebody talking about committing acts of violence against your young people? Why would you do that? And this was an Asian man actually, and I was quite upset that actually didn't come from one of the elders in my own community, because we need to be talking about that more. When your young child says that, no, we want to listen to this music for a certain reason, tell them no. Or don't just tell it to them in that way. Sit them down and explain why it's not in their interest, it's not in our community's interest to keep promoting and supporting and buying into that kind of lifestyle that is promoted and we're told is the only one that we can have. Lastly, because I know we're running short on time, I just want to talk a little bit about identity, because again, that's really, really key, especially in the issue of violence and why it continues to be perpetuated. What systems are in place to build our understanding of our self-worth? I'd just like to say, my dad's actually from Zambia, and so I think it's very fitting that this, Zambian, I'm really liking that. But I wouldn't have always, and this is a real issue that I want to talk about. I think, contrasting to America, the idea of being mixed race is much more common in the UK. And we have to embrace that, because otherwise there are a lot of young people that are going to miss out. I felt like actually politically I had no other choice but to identify with black, because I'm perceived as being black, which means I'm going to be oppressed as a black person, which means I am black. But do you not think that's a bit challenging for me then in my personal life to completely ignore one side of my identity? Because my mum is white, my mum is from Cyprus and Scotland, my dad is from Zambia and Malawi. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about any of my cultures. Actually, I went to the African Liberation Day Pan-African kind of meeting in London a while ago, and they asked this question, they got everyone to stand up, and then they said, sit down if you feel African, and everybody sat down. And told everyone to stand up again, and they said, sit down if you feel, no, so they said, stay standing if you feel British, and everybody sat down, apart from me and one other person. In my personal life, do I really feel British? No, I feel excluded by that system just as much as you all do. But How could I feel anything other? I've never been outside to any of the countries I'm supposed to be from. I don't speak any of the languages. I don't have any access to the black side of my family because my dad, as I said, was very violent to my mum and we had to completely move away from him. And then it was his choice not to speak to me for a further 10 years. I haven't seen him since I was 11. And so, who was going to teach me about this black identity that I have to hold, but I don't know anything about it? I don't know anything about my roots. When I first started secondary school, let me make it clear, I love this lady over here. She stood up and she said, my name is, sorry, I can't actually remember what it is. But she made a point, and some people were a bit, after she said that. She said, I tell them to call me VJ because it's easier. And through growing up, I mean, Temi is not a European name, it's a Nigerian name, but I'm not actually from Nigeria. It was a nickname that was given to me by my auntie, my white auntie. Even more strange at that, so we have to, you know. But when I was, my full name is actually Temi Mwale. And when I was growing up, I used to cuss out my mum. Why would you let my dad name me? I've got such an embarrassing name. I hated it. I really hated it. And when I started secondary school, and you know, none of the teachers know you and they have to read it off the register, people could see me. I felt so much shame that my name had to be this. And it was so, you know, people would laugh about it. And when they realized it was something that I felt, you know, a way about, they would call it to me so that I would feel embarrassed and feel upset. Luckily I don't feel that way anymore, but that was through personal development. That's because somewhere along the way, I found my way and found my identity. I'm not all the way there yet now, but I'm further along that process. But somebody should have been there to tell me, actually, you know, some people drop out their last name because they don't want the colonial name that they've been given. You should be thankful that you didn't have to have one of those and that you actually have a name that's true to some of your roots. At all of these kind of events, I hear a lot that, you know, this saying, this African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. Where is that village, may I ask? Where is it? When will it stop being rhetoric and start being actually implemented? When will we treat other people's children like we treat our own and start that communal way of living and village life whereby if we see someone else's child doing something wrong, we're going to take them in and educate them because there's a reason for what they're doing. They might not understand it, but we need to school them. Without having access to the black side of my family, I discovered Pan-Africanism on my own. And the reason why I wanted a show of hands at the young people who had heard about it before is that I was really interested to find out if they'd been taught by somebody. I wish I'd been taught by somebody. This is something I should have been taught growing up. And my question is, given that we have so many displaced people and so many mixed-race people in this country that might not have access to their black roots, who is going to teach them what they need to know to grow up? My white mother could not teach me what it's going to be like to be a black woman, but God, she tried. She did. I give her that. She's the best mum I could have ever asked for, but she couldn't be expected to know those things. So then you have to take it upon yourselves to find those children where they are and speak to their parents. Ask them if you can do a kind of communal little education club before we get our proper institutions. Because I'm not saying that's a substitute. We need our own schools. But before we have implemented them, because we don't have time to wait, if you go back to your community tomorrow and you see a few, you know, mixed race children and maybe you're aware that they're, you know, the black side of their family isn't around, what are you going to do to bring them into your family? Because they deserve to have family, they deserve the right to know about their history and their roots, and they deserve to be taught it and not have to find it on their own. I'm sorry. As I said, the name of this talk was Youth at the Forefront. But how can we be at the forefront of our guidance? We need our wisdom, we need our counsel that comes from our elders. We need to be able to call on you, as Lee said, in times when we need advice. But we also have a lot of passion and energy that some of you older people who might be a little bit burnt out do not have. You cannot continue holding on to a baton that you don't have all the energy to take forward. We have the energy, we have the passion, we need the wisdom, we need the knowledge, and it's your duty to give that to us so we can take this back forward.
We have to press along, and I'm going to just ask Mrs. Eloise Edwards, who we spoke of this morning, to come up and briefly tell us about the Nana Bonsu project. Nana Bonsu is her late husband, a very, very fine brother who, as I said, I knew very well. And when he died, I was devastated because he always seemed so indestructible. And then all of a sudden you hear that he's gone. So I felt it very deeply. Mrs. Edwards, please come up and tell us about this project.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon again, sisters and brothers. And I was not going to say anything again after this morning, but I was enthused by what was being said by the previous chair regarding the unions. Now, I've given a few of the booklets out regarding. I don't know how many of you have seen this booklet. Right? My husband Beresford, his mother was a Garveyite. So I grew up more or less with her telling me about Garvey. And to anybody that knew Beresford knew that he was a man of Garvey. Our home has got more books about Garvey than I think Garvey's home. Now, Beresford came to England in 1960, and I followed in 1961. And because he had this upbringing of Garveyite, he was very, very pushy in his way to get others, particularly people from our communities, to understand that Marcus Garvey was a leader for us, and he was the one who wanted us to go back to Africa, and so on and so forth. So I grew up in that kind of an environment. Personally, my mother died when I was 6 years of age, and I was put in a Catholic convent, so it was very strange to me, all of the things that he was saying, but I soon learned. And as I said, he came in 1960, and he joined the Printers Union. He was a printer. And he noticed that the company, Hugh Stevenson's Boxworks in Levenshulme, anybody knows that? Stevenson's Boxworks? No? Okay. Well, he joined that place and worked as a printer. But there wasn't a union there. And as there were lots of people like ourselves working for Stevenson's, he decided to set up a union. And of course, the people that owned the place weren't very happy. They thought how it was that this black man could come from the jungle and tell them what to do. So in his way, because Beresford was a very forceful man, he still set the union up and ended up being sacked by Hugh Stevenson's. He took it to court, and he lost. And there was a gentleman, he was he was in charge of things like that, yeah? And so he took up the case. Master of the Rolls, he was called. Judge Denning, I don't know if anybody's heard of Judge Denning. Lord Denning, yeah? So Lord Denning took up the case, and he won it. And that case, the case now become a precedent case. Yeah? It's all over the world, it's known. A man's right to work, that's what it goes on. So if you want to go on the internet, you will find it. A Man's Right to Work by Lord Denning. I feel that I needed to say this to you because of what the sister this morning was talking about, trade unions, okay? We have to be careful as well, you know, don't just jump in there because they don't have our interests at heart. And as she said, the chair said, she started up the union, and you know, people joined that union, and it seems to be going forward very well. But I needed to let you know about this because it's known all over the world. It's a precedent case. So that's my little thing about the union. I must say this as well. It's a saying that I took from somewhere I can't remember. It says, life is a journey. It's not the years in your life that counts, but the life in your years. Yes. You know, and so, yes, that's that. And I wanted to tell you again as well about a plaque. You know, we were talking this morning about the 45 conference. That conference was held in the old Charlton Town Hall in Manchester. And I was fortunate enough, I don't know how many of you have heard of Kat Luck. She was a great sister, and she was one of my best friends. And Kat and I went to Manchester City Council and asked them to fund a plaque to put on that town hall in All Saints, right? And I don't know how many of you know about, I mean, our photographs are there on the front of the building. And, you know, really and truly, had we thought of it, we should have purchased that building. Today we should have had that because, you know, it's a memorial to our previous ancestors, you know, but I'm not quite sure if it's still there. It probably is, but I'm being told by somebody that it's going to be turned into houses, something like that. And when we should, I mean, it's something that we should have owned. You know, and I've been trying to get people to understand that that is something that we should cherish. But, you know, we don't have it anymore. I'm not sure. I think that's it. Yeah. I have given you one of the best.
I just gave it back to you.
You just gave it back to me. That's when you were 3 years old. Right? So, you know, if you're interested, I think everybody should have one of these. If you go onto the internet, it's on the, Bonsu. You know, and there was a library dedicated to Bonsu. So, please, thank you very much.
We're now going to move on to clearly one of our highlights, which is Dr. Umar Johnson. I'm really not going to introduce him because I know him already. And in any event, there is a bio in the program which you can read for yourself if you really do that. So, Dr. Umar Johnson, please speak to us.
Manchester, England, make some noise! Let me first say thank you to the committee that put on this 70th anniversary commemoration of the 1945 5th Pan-African Congress that took place here in Manchester. I'm humbled by the invitation, and I'm humbled that they thought enough of me to bring me here and give me a few minutes to make some remarks. Just 2 months ago, I took a group of Africans from America, American Africans, Americanized Africans. We were at Ghana, and we visited Kwame Nkrumah's shrine, and we visited the W.E.B. Du Bois Center. In studying the history of Pan-Africanism, you're going to study the history of a great movement, but you're also going to study the history of a movement that still has some unfinished business and some unreconciled ideological strivings. Within the Pan-Africanist movement, I represent the Garveyite wing of that movement. And I will speak to you as a revolutionary Pan-African nationalist, because that's what Garveyites are. We are not integrationists, we are not multiculturalists, and we are not accommodationists. This is important, and it must be stated. When you deal with Garveyism, to be clear, you're dealing with a movement that puts the needs of African people first. We are our number one priority. We do not, and this is the protocol of the Garvey movement yesterday. It was the protocol of the Garvey movement when I was its Minister of Education. We do not form permanent alliances with any organization, and definitely not any other race or culture. And the reason it is in the policy of the Garvey movement not to establish permanent alliances is no other race of people has ever proven to be as interested in the African as the African is interested in herself. This has to be stated because in the historiography of Pan-Africanism, I've noticed over the past decade, it has been moving away from a race-first, unapologetically African position to one of Obamaism type of loving everyone on earth as much as we love ourselves. That's not Garvey. We respect every race. We hate no one, but we are our own priority. And we are unapologetic in saying that we are for the African thing only. Wishing other groups and movements goodwill does not take away from us being for the African thing. It's okay to wish goodwill to other people. But we must not be confused that when white folk or non-Africans attended the Marcus Garvey conventions, they attended them as guests, not members. There is no non-African membership in a Pan-African organization. If there's non-Africans in it, then it's not a Pan-African organization. Which takes us to another controversial tenet of Garveyism, and that is the refusal to accept non-African funding. One of the biggest contradictions of so-called Garveyites and Pan-Africanists here, there, and everywhere is claiming to be against white supremacy while you're being funded by white supremacy. The hand that pays is the hand that rules. You cannot be a Pan-African movement being funded by the government of Britain. You cannot be. It is a contradiction in ideology. The revolution will not be financed by your oppressor. It never was, and it never will be, and we need to be clear about that. The mixed race African issue. What is the Garveyite position on that? The Garveyite position on the mixed race African is that there's no such thing as a mixed race African. The Garveyite perspective is that if you are of an African parent, if you are of African parentage, then you are an African child. We don't play the schisms and the isms. We don't do biraciality, multiraciality. Why don't we do that? Because during enslavement, there was no such thing as a biracial African. During enslavement, there was no such thing as a multiracial African. You were considered an N-word with the rest of us. There was no difference. Now, when they divided you out, they may have used mulatto as a grouping mechanism, but when it came to valuing the life
The so-called biracial African person's life was no more valuable than someone who was 100% full-blooded African.
So why are we playing these games now? But we would argue, though, that for those who are of mixed racial ancestry, you must identify wholeheartedly with your Africanity, which does not dismiss the fact that your mother or father may be white. On the personal level, that's your ancestry. You got to get to know it, you got to get to understand it, but on the realm of politics, you must recognize that the world sees you as an African and nothing else. And I agree with the queen who spoke just before me. She's right. We have to be more
inviting of so-called mixed-race Africans into revolutionary circle. Because if we don't bring them into us, the enemy will recruit them into his army. And we have President Obama to be shown as the best example of what can be done with a mixed-race African.
We believe in independence. Pan-Africanists in general, Garveyites in particular, independence of government. We may run people for office, but we don't endorse parties. That's not Pan-Africanism. Because that party structure is a Eurocentric reality created to protect European imperialism. So why would you endorse it? It's okay to run somebody for office as a strategy. But don't let mainstream European electoral politics become your way of life.
Remember, our goal as Pan-Africanists is not to get a black president. It's not to get a black governor. It's not for a black parliamentarian in a white system. It's to build our own governmental system for our people. We seek our own participation in someone else's.
But I saw a lot of backsliding these past 7 years. I saw a lot of Pan-Africanists get fooled by the President Obama illusion. Oh yes. Die-hard Pan-Africanists, people who never red, black, and green. I saw them taking a second look at the red, black, and green and saying, well, maybe Obama is symbolizing a transformation away from totalitarian Europeanism to multiculturalism. How wrong they were. And their ignorance stemmed from the fact that they did not understand white supremacy. Because when you understand white supremacy, you recognize that the tactics may change. The strategies may be replaced. The particular behaviors may undergo some modification. But the purpose and principle of white supremacy
is consistent. And for those of you who fell for the Obama shenanigan, it was because you didn't understand white supremacy. White supremacy is about white control, power, and authority. And if it is in the best interest of white supremacy to put a black face in place to protect white power, that's what it will do. And many of you fell for that strategy. 7 years before he was elected, I called it. I said, by the time this man leaves office, I said it at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, by the time this man leaves office, black folk, not just in America, but around the world, will be in a situation that is almost as worse as slavery. The anointing of Obama was not the signaling of a transformation. It was a time out for racism to regather itself, refuel itself, and in 2016, they're going to come out the gates wrong. And we got to be prepared for it. Well, why are we not multiculturalists? We're not multiculturalists because we don't recognize any other culture to be equal to ours because we are the creator of every other culture. If you know your history, where did multiculturalism get its impetus? First of all, it's a European brain product. And a lot of us are identifying with a lot of European brain products. Multiculturalism multiculturalism was invented at the turn of the century as an attack on African-centered education and approaches to historiography. So how can you be a Pan-Africanist and be a multiculturalist when multiculturalism was invented to kill the African-centered approach to world history? These are the contradictions we have to look at. This is why you have to study any ideological position you think you belong to. Know the history before you claim to be an adherent. Know the history before you claim to be an adherent. In the Garvey movement, we don't believe in mixed race. We don't believe that black men should be with anything other than a black woman. In Garvey's life, you cannot join the UNIA if your wife didn't look like your mother. Why are we changing up now? I'll give you something else that's controversial. Homosexuality and lesbianism. In Garvey's day, you could not be a member if you were sexually confused. But I know Garveyites today back off from that. You want to hide that. So if you want to pick and choose the principles of Garveyism that we want to espouse, we don't want to lay them all out there. That doesn't mean we hate our homosexual brothers and sisters. I don't. I disagree with the lifestyle because it's anti-African. I disagree with the lifestyle because I know it's being funded by the World Bank, the IMF, to depopulate African people. I know our homosexual and lesbian brothers and sisters don't know how they're being used for something larger. They was never at no World Bank meeting. They don't belong to the Bilderbergs. But just because you was not at the meeting don't mean you're not a pawn in the game. And we got to recognize that. We believe in African family. Our whole universe is based on what? The balance of masculine and feminine energy. That is African reality. Masculine and feminine. Every atom in existence has a positive charge and a negative. What happens when you put two positives together? What happens when you put two negatives together? You destroy it. The Garveyite is unapologetic in his Africanity. But we need to be careful about something, and that is being armchair Pan-Africanist. There's this new thing that says you can be a Pan-Africanist and have no connection to Africa. How in the hell can that be? In fact, in America, we got a phrase for it. It says if you can't go to Africa in physical form, go in your mind. But you don't go to the Korean hair store for weave in your mind. You go for real. You don't go to Nike and Adidas in your mind. You go for real and you spend money in those stores. So how is it we can go to the Arab-owned business for real with money, and we can go to the Jewish-owned business for real with money, and we can go to the car lot and the clothing store and the weave shop with real money on our feet, real walking. But when it comes to connecting with Africa, we want to go and dream about going, as if you can afford to get there. Pan-Africanism is connection. And we have to recognize two significant contradictions of the Pan-African movement. Even Mr. Garvey fell a little short here. Number one, most great Pan-Africanists in history. Because remember, Pan-Africanism came to Africa, it was not started there. Nor there was a started with Henry Sylvester Williams. The grandfathers of Pan-Africanism were from the States. John Brown Rushworth, the great Jamaican who came to America by way of Jamaica, the first black man to earn a college degree, the first black man to publish a newspaper in America, Jamaican-born John Brown Rushworth, a great Pan-Africanist before Garvey, but even in Jamaica they don't know his name. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner from Georgia, who taught the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a child that God was black. That's where Mr. Muhammad got it. That's where Marcus Garvey got it. He lived before Garvey. Martin Delaney from Pennsylvania, the one who invented the phrase Africa for the Africans. Garvey took it and added those at home and those abroad. The reason Garvey succeeded in America is because the Pan-African groundwork had been laid. Alexander Crummell, W.E.B. Du Bois' first teacher on Pan-Africanism, who spent 20 years in West Africa, the longest sojourn of an American-born Pan-Africanist. So the groundwork was laid. That's why Garvey survived in America where he couldn't do it in Jamaica. Because in America, you're either black or white. You mix race, that's black. But in the Caribbean, I have a more sophisticated color hierarchy. You have octoroons and quadroons and aliens and all kind of stuff. But in America, it's one or the other. So it was easy to accept a program of race first in America, whereas in the Caribbean, it would be more difficult because being a shade lighter meant you get a better job. Being a shade lighter means you might get accepted to college. So it was a lot different there. That's why it struggled there, but it found fertile ground in America. Pan-Africanism means oneness. Oneness with all Africans. When you say you Pan-Africanist, you're saying I'm placing my membership in the African family first. And that is more important than being a Muslim. It's more important than being a Christian. It's more important than being a Mason. It's more important than being an Igbo or Yoruba or a Hausa or a Zulu or a Xhosa. I'm African first. That's Pan-Africanism, which is another contradiction. Because some of y'all in here, let's be honest, in the States, you're more linked up with your cultural tribal identity than you are with your African identity. Let's call it what it is. Some of you more Jamaican than you African. Let's call it what it is. Some of us more Black American than we African. Let's call it what it is. Some of you identify more with a slave ship puts you down at and not where it picks you up at. Let's call it what it is. The Pan-Africanist is a statesman and a stateswoman of African affairs. We're different from everyone else. They still family, but we don't see the world through the same eyes as the Hebrew, or the Nation of Islam, or the Guys and Earths, or the Nawapians, all of whom we respect, but we do it a little bit differently because we dealing with family on the global level. So we don't just deal with what's going on with blacks in Britain. We don't just deal with what's going on with blacks in the Caribbean. We don't just deal with what's going on with blacks in the continent. We step back, look at the whole chessboard, and we plot and strategize and say, based on what's going on all 7 continents, this is what we should be doing. And some people who don't understand politics will say, well, aren't you Pan-Africanists creating such a big thing that you'll never be able to get anything done? Don't you need to chunk it down into chunks? Yes, with the implementation of the program. But no, with the ideology and vision. Because if you are a Pan-Africanist, you believe something. And that is that fundamental to the improvement for African life is a collective approach to the solutions that must involve all Africans everywhere at the same time. If you Pan-Africanist, you believe Black UK does not fix some problems until Black Africa does. If you Pan-Africanist, you believe that Black Canada, Black America, Black Caribbean cannot rise without the mothership of Africa herself. If you Pan-Africanist, you believe that the respect we get around the world is a direct reflection of the disrespect shown to our mother continent. Why are Chinese respected in the UK? Chinese are respected in the US, the UK, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Canada, wherever they go. Same thing with the Arab, wherever they go. Same thing with the East Indian, wherever they go. Why is it they are respected no matter where they live? Not just in some places, but everywhere. Because they have a mother country that demands respect. They have a mother country that will not allow any of its natives to be disrespected by a foreign government. We're doing this whole thing wrong. Even Dr. King had to look at it towards the end of the civil rights movement and say that in order for us to fix this black thing, we're going to have to play a hand in that African thing. So when we say Pan-Africanist, we're looking at the grand chessboard. You got to realize something about Garvey. He's the only leader you had since slavery. The only one who led globally. Everyone else was regional. They were great men, but they might have led something in the UK. They might have led something in the U.S. They might have led something in Africa. They might have led something in the Caribbean. But His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey, the elected provisional president of Africa, was leader of black people all over the world. Another contradiction. From John Brown all the way down to Garvey. And Brother Beanie Elder talked about it earlier. And that is our rejection of African ancestral veneration. One of the shortcomings of Pan-Africanism, study them all. Very few Pan-Africanists, including those from Africa, venerated their ancestors. And I'm saying here and now that that's one thing that we got to fix. We got to make that right. Because in order for us to win this war against white supremacy, we're going to need every soldier we can have. The ones we can see and the ones we can't see. Brothers and sisters, Pan-Africanism is about being proud to be African. Not just knowing your history. I know a lot of sellouts who know their damn history. You know how many scholars we got in America who knows history inside and out, but has no race pride? Knowing your history doesn't impress me. There's white historians with PhDs in African studies. That's intellect. Pride is a spiritual electrification of the intellectual information. Brothers and sisters, education. I'm going to round it out here because I'm an educator and I'm a psychologist. The Queen was absolutely correct. We are a traumatized people. And you know what's so unique about the trauma of the African? The reason it's so difficult for us to heal from our trauma is because the source of the trauma has not stopped. So we're looking for healing while we're being traumatized. What woman being violated by a man, God forbid, what woman being violated by a man can begin to heal while the man is still inflicting the abuse? The time out hasn't come yet. And we need the time out to come. That's where the hate comes from. The pain, the anguish, the reason we have so much violence in the community is due to three primary causes. Number one, miseducation. We haven't been properly prepared for life. That includes properly prepared to understand white supremacy and to navigate it. So for those of you who are educators of African children, homeschool or real school, if you're not teaching them about white supremacy, what it is, how it operates, and how to navigate it, you're miseducating those children. So miseducation. Two, economic castration. The black man can't get no work. The black man can't get no job. After the civil rights movement, the white man came up with a new strategy. They said since black folks want to go to college so bad, since black folks want to wear a shirt and tie to work so bad, this is what we gonna do. Because at the end of the civil rights movement, black men were tired of working with their hands. Black women were tired of scrubbing floors and washing clothes. They said, I want to do something that uses my head more than my hands. So the white man said, let's accommodate that. We're going to give them degrees and send them to college. We're going to make everybody qualifiable for a student loan to go get an education. Have you ever wondered why you could go into a bank here in the UK and ask for a loan to start your business and you get denied? But if you ask for a loan for college, you get approved? Have you ever wondered why you go into the bank and ask for a loan to build an industry, you get denied? But if you ask for a loan to buy a car, you get approved? Why is it I can't get a loan for business, but you approve me for a student loan that's worth more than the business loan I was asking for? You approve me for a car loan that's worth more than the business loan I was asking for. It's because if they invest in your education or invest in your transportation, they investing in themselves. Because the interest rate on that student loan and the car note interest rate is going to have you indebted to the bankers for the next 10 to 20 years. They're not going to give you money to separate from the system. They're only going to give you money to become more dependent upon it, which is why when Marcus, just before he made his transition, Mr. Garvey was plotting an international Pan-African bank. Why was he doing it? Because he said, I could put the ships on the water, but when we make money with the Black Star Line, we got to put the money in white banks. So even if everyone in this room has your own business right now in Manchester, we are Black Wall Street, we booming, we got supermarkets and hospitals, gas stations and distribution networks. What do you do with the profit from your business? You put it in Morgan Stanley, Chase Manhattan, these European-owned banks. So even though it looked like you're the captain of your destiny, you're not, because the white man is able to float loans off of your black money. That's right. Under the laws of banking, you can loan $100 for every dollar deposited. So if you got $1 billion black dollars deposited times 100, our money's still working for the enemy more than it's working for us. So to talk about a black business without a black bank to capture the capital, you only dealing with half the story. We need black banks and we need black schools. How can you call yourself a revolutionary when the mind of your child is being exploited by the oppressor? How can you call yourself a revolutionary when your child goes to school and learns the songs and the pledges of Britain, gets totally Europeanized, and then when they graduate from high school, you want to get mad at them for acting white, but you're the one who subjected it to them in the first place. No white money, no white participation, no white romance. That's Garveyism. I'm giving it to you. That's Garveyism. I know some of y'all that fell for the multicultural movement. Loving other people as much as you love your own. That's crazy. Find me a European Jew who loves a German as much as himself. Find me one. Nobody does. I didn't say hate nobody. No. That's not African. We don't hate, but we do understand. Don't hate them. Respect them. They just need to understand why we got to do this ourselves. You know why? Because when a white person comes into a solution meeting for black folk, even if they well-meaning, black people, because of the white Jesus complex, we will automatically start looking to the white person without even recognizing it to deliver us from evil, because we've been taught that they are the greatest. So when they come amongst you, your Willie Lynch chip is automatically activated the minute they walk in the room. So in conclusion, we got something new we're doing in the States right now. My organization is Team Pan-African, and we have a research and repatriation task force where we're looking for brothers and sisters around the world who are interested in investigating a particular African nation for repatriation feasibility. We have folks on Team Somalia, Team Ghana, Team Nigeria, Team Ethiopia, Team Kenya, Team Malawi, Team Congo, Team Zambia. What is the job of each team? Investigate the economics, investigate the stability of government, because we don't want to send Africans back home to a government that is in turmoil, where they can get caught up in somebody else's civil war. We got to investigate the structure, the minerals, the resources, what businesses will be most likely to thrive in Nigeria, because the ones that may work in Nigeria may not work in Ethiopia. Africa is a very diverse continent. Not every country is ready to receive you. And so if you're interested in being a part of that, please get in contact with me. The other thing I want to say is this. Repatriation has been something pushed to the side by Pan-Africans. We love Africa, but we don't like going. We love Africa, but we don't like moving over there. We hate white supremacy, but we would rather fight the white man in the UK than help build our brothers and sisters back home. It is a contradiction. I'll be in South Africa next week for a 3-week tour. Cape Town, Pretoria, Zululand, Durban. Can't wait to go. Haven't been since '09. They invited me there. And every time I go to Africa, I don't care what country it is, the question is the same. If y'all love Africa so much, why don't y'all ever come to invest here? Let me explain something to y'all. African countries are well within their right not to trust us, because we have not proven that we can be consistent with any damn thing we do. They should be skeptical of you. Because you have been under the white man so long, they have to make sure that they form an alliance with an authentic African and not a falsified European. You know what happened in Liberia when we went back. You know what happened in Sierra Leone when we went back. We became the oppressors against our own brother and sister because we were operating with a Eurocentric mentality. Marcus Garvey never said that every African should go back home. He never said that. There was no such thing called a Back to Africa movement. Never. The media called it that. Mr. Garvey said only those who can be of use, which is only 20% of you in here. You're not going to Africa with your perm, your weave. You a man with a boyfriend, girl with a girlfriend. Africa don't need that. You go with basketballs and video games and tweeting. Africa don't need that. You cause more problems than you solve over there. As far as I'm concerned, anybody want to get repatriated, they got to go through an interview and a training process. In conclusion, I want to let you guys know tomorrow night at 5 o'clock at the West Indian Center here in Manchester, I will be giving an address to you all on the state of Black America, bringing you up to date on what's going on with your brothers and sisters in America. What does Dr. Umar Johnson think about Minister Farrakhan's march last weekend? Bring you up to date with what happened in Charleston, the Charleston massacre that took place the day after I left Charleston. Baltimore, Ferguson, I was just in St. Louis. I was on the phone with Michael Brown's dad for a few minutes. I'm going to bring you up to stuff, because just like y'all got to let me know what's going on here when I come, I got to let you know what's going on there when you come. So that's tomorrow, 5 o'clock. Which West Indian Center? Camera Road, 5 o'clock. Let me leave you with a quote from my ancestor, Frederick Douglass. And I'll be coming back to the UK in March because I want to do my Frederick Douglass play. With me as Frederick Douglass. I got the wig and the clothes. Before I give you this Douglass quote, I want to give you one more tenet of Garveyism, and there's so many you can't cover them in one day. But one of them is equality for women. Does anybody in here know why the white women of America got the right to vote? I want my feminists to do your research. The reason the white woman of America got the right to vote in what year? 1920. Was it a coincidence? No! If you don't believe me, do your research. White women wrote the President of the United States protesting the right not to vote because Marcus Garvey, the leader of the Negro organization, has given black women not only the right to vote, they run their own military, their own auxiliary, and this Negro requires of every division of his organization that there be a lady president next to every male president. We don't need feminism, we need womanism. African family is what we need. Frederick Douglass said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. He said, those who are whipped the easiest are those who are whipped the most. Frederick said, for 20 years I prayed on my knees to God for freedom, but the good Lord gave me no freedom till I got up off my knees. He said, if you want respect, stop looking for pity, because the man who pities you will never respect you, and the man who respects you has no need for pity. He said, men may not get all they work for, but you must work for all that you get. Queen Mother Harriet Tubman said, I freed hundreds of slaves, could have freed millions more, but they didn't even know they were slaves. Marcus Garvey was asked, are you an African or are you a Jamaican? Are you an African or are you a Jamaican? Are you an African or are you a Jamaican? And in response to that question, His Excellency, leader of the largest black organization in modern history, the man who gave us the red, black, and green, put ships on the water, put so much fear in the Europeans that he had to create the Council on Foreign Relations. Garvey said, you asked me, am I an African or am I Jamaican? I answer you simply, I would never give up a continent for an island. I'm African.
All right. You just heard a very powerful address. We're still having time for it. So, has our sister gone? 10 minutes of questions to our sister, who is also addressed us powerfully, and our brother.
Together or separate?
Together. Questions, remember, it's 10 minutes. So time, brief questions, no big time statements, no speeches. I'm seeing two hands, you and then, no, my sister, brothers in front of you. Yes.
Self-hatred from slavery.
Yeah, okay. Good short question.
I just wanted to repeat a quote he said the Prophet said, are you an African or are you a Jamaican? And Marcus Garvey responded that he was on an island, looking about the continent. I think one of the things that, could I ask, is it possible that we substitute African for the word black? Because it's, for me, it's part of the process towards unity, to actually see and identify ourselves as African, to actually refer to ourselves as African. I think that's really important that we set that example.
I would answer that by saying this. Number one, we should never substitute an adjective for a noun, ever. So we're always African. But I see no problem with referring to ourselves as black in the political context, because for many of our people who have not yet embraced their Africanity, being black is a stage on that road, but accepting your Africanity is the final solution and destination. As the late great doctor, what's my brother's name, Khalid Abdul Muhammad said, blackness is color, culture, consciousness, and a connection to the divine creator. So we affirm blackness, but it is no substitute for our Africanity.
Do you want to say anything on that, my sister? Okay. I'm seeing your hand, Umar. I think this lady here was in front of you. Yes. So, sorry. No. Let's.
Can you tell me whether you think Obama is the Antichrist?
My answer is simply, and some more.
Okay.
I just want to put a couple of points to you, if I can, my understanding of the history. Now, there were African men, members of the UNIA in Britain, who were married to European women.
Okay.
We know this because Amy Jakes Garvey tells us this in Garvey and Garvey's. We're talking about 1928.
Okay.
In 1928, the Garveys, as you know, came over to Britain. They spent about 5 or 6 months here in Britain, living in West London. And during that time, there was a branch of UNI here, made up of African women. They were married to European women. I mean, that was just a common
Right,
thing.
and I don't disagree.
That was,
Two things I would say to that.
yeah.
And the reason I asked when is because after Marcus Garvey's deportation from America, we get a weakening of the organizational protocol. Today, you can be a member of certain divisions of the UNIA, white wife. that wouldn't have been tolerated in Garvey's time. The other thing, too, we have to keep in mind, because there were so many divisions, things went on without Mr. Garvey's knowledge that he would not have approved of.
So I refer you to Garvey and Garveyism.
Yes, I read it. Right. Plenty of
Quick
times.
second point.
And the second point is around the fact of spirituality. Garvey himself was a Christian.
Yes.
And
And that was a contradiction, not being a Christian, but that he never embraced African spirituality, ancestral veneration. None of the founding fathers of
that was
Pan-Africanism.
the point I was putting.
Yeah, that's one of the things we need to fix now.
Yeah. Clear basis of agreement then. Anything on that, my sister?
Yeah, I think I feel a bit uncomfortable, and I'll just put it out there because I had a lot to say about how I feel being a mixed race person. I do think that the situation in America and the situation here has been different, and we can't always. I know we're talking about a global movement, and we're talking about ideals, and we're talking about ideology, but to say that somebody can't, whether we're talking historically or in the present time, I just think I felt quite displaced at hearing that, because my mum will be my mum. She will always be my mum. My family will be my family. They'll always be my family. And yes, I know politically, I hear what you're saying, politically I identify as black because I'm perceived as black. I said that myself. But a movement that has in its ideology no mixing, how can that movement accept me then? Because I'm a product of that.
And let me answer that as Marcus Garvey answered it in his words. You are not responsible for how you got here. And your genetic makeup makes you an African. You understand? So you are accepted as a member of the family. Why? Because when that black man laid down with that white woman, or that white man laid down with that black woman, when those 23 chromosomes from each of them mixed, that was not a 50-50 split, because a recessive gene cannot hold its weight against a dominant gene. So when an African child is created, they are 99.999% African. And that means if I see your mother who's not African, I'm going to respect her because she's your mother. And she's entitled to that respect. And you're going to respect her because that's the womb that bore you. But when it comes to the political work that's done for Africans, your mom has to respectfully understand you cannot be present in this meeting.
Now, my brothers and sisters, the time is going to strike, and we're not going to get anything like everybody who wants to ask questions. So some of you can put on the hand down.
So what you doing? Answer our questions. I'm going to write it down. Answer
No, there's a time issue. I'm seeing that sister over there, and this brother here. And we may very well have to end there, trust me. Yes.
Oh, the elbow. Get the elbow first, Bob. Get the elbow first.
And, sorry. Yeah, right. We'll start with you, Eloise. Yes, please. Sorry.
I wonder if there's a reason, because Marcus Garvey had two queens.
Had
Yes.
two.
First wife and second.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why is it that is she not teaching a girl in the system? And why?
Both of them were. Well, I was speaking of the movement itself in Garveyism, but you're correct, Queen Mother, in that Garvey did not do this alone. He did it with millions, men as well as women, not just Amy Jakes and Amy Ashwood, but you had so many others, ladies, Henrietta Vinton Davis, and so many other sisters, leading mothers of Pan-Africanism were a part of it.
No, but he was married to them both.
Yes, well,
Yes.
one and then the other.
Very
Yes.
briefly, with Amy Ashwood, very briefly, about 6 months, in fact. And then that broke, and
Right.
a little later he married Amy James.
Right.
But I think we have to leave that one there, with due respect, my money.
There was
yes.
a little shenanigans going on there.
Yes. Yes.
I'm just waiting for that thing.
Say again?
I'm just waiting for the
If not you, you're putting up your hand for somebody else? All right, somebody else. Go. Sir, no, I don't understand what's happening. I am pointing at you, my sister. I'm pointing at you, my sister. Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. It's just a quick comment.
Thank you.
Basically, I just want to make a little correction around the whole issue of student loans. It's not always that apparent that they want to give us loans. I had a mentee in that situation. He went to get a car loan. Yes, he got a car loan. When he went back to say, well, actually, I need to extend this because it's my student loan, the bank manager said to him, if I knew you had it for a PhD, I wouldn't have given it to you. Of course he doesn't want to give it to him. He's a young black man. The bank manager probably doesn't have a PhD. His kids probably don't have a PhD. And he wanted to stop this young black man from getting an education. And I told him to go back. He wanted to give up. And I insisted. He went back. And even if it was to have his partner go with him and let her get another frigging car loan. I said, you've got to have that PhD because your kids are going to follow you and they need to see both of their parents having those PhDs.
Powerful, powerful.
I think that speaks for itself. Thank you. Yes? You agree?
Yes.
Oh.
Well said.
Sorry, this is Dr. Umar Johnson.
Yeah.
When I first heard his lectures, he was talking about the issues of ADHD.
Yes. Ain't no daddy at home disorder, ADHD. And y'all need to stop putting y'all kids on that medicine because they're killing them.
Yes.
Okay? They're killing them. Not only are they killing the boys with the medicine, but many of these medicines are being given estrogen so the boys can imitate female body parts. So they get flabby breasts, wide hips, the voice is not getting deep. These are feminizing chemicals as well as extermination chemicals because most of them, the Ritalin, the Adderall, the Concerta, the Cyclic, the Risperdal, the Prozac, the Paxil, they will over the long run affect your son's ability to produce healthy spermatozoa so he won't be able to have children later in life because you gave him drugs because some white teacher said he needed medicine so he can sit still long enough to learn about Christopher Columbus.
Lots of hands. Lots of hands. So wait, all right. You must give me
He said he didn't finish, Elmer.
all right.
So if you trust me,
Yeah.
basically, what you just said there, 100% true. Now, as someone who works in schools, the schools are trying to encourage the parents to enforce them to take these chemicals of what you just said. Now, some parents are wising up to this and they're refusing to give their kids these medicines.
Right.
Henceforth, because of course they're getting off the chemicals or whatever, it's causing disruption in the school and then they're getting excluded. What I wanted to ask you as someone who works in this field, people here who might have children who have special education on these issues, ADHD, whatever, practicality, are there any alternative like herbal medicines?
Yes, let me run through it real quick.
Diet.
First of all, when the teacher starts complaining about behavioral problems, before you run off assuming that the teacher knows what she's talking about, you need to hire a professional to go into your child's classroom and observe the class to see whether or not the complaints are legitimate, because teachers exaggerate our boys' misbehavior. So the first thing you do is you legitimize. Number two, you ask the school, where is the behavior intervention plan for my child? If a child has trouble focusing or controlling their hyperactivity, there's supposed to be a behavior plan complete with rewards and consequences. What does he get when he does well? And what happens when he doesn't do so well? Most teachers have no behavior plan. They rely on the parents to be the behavior plan, which isn't going to work because behavior can only be modified in the setting where it takes place. Y'all not in the class, the teacher is, and she has to take responsibility over that. Now, if you deem that your child does have an abnormal level of hyperactivity and attention, there's herbal formulas that you can take. Be calm, calm child. There's over 25 reputed herbal alternatives to psychiatric meds that have proven to work over the long haul. But before you start wasting money on herbs, calm child, be calm, Melissa Supreme are three of the best. Calm child, be calm, Melissa Supreme. But before you go spending $40, okay, on some hoodoo, what you need to do is you need to first cut out the sugar in the diet, cut out the caffeine in the diet, and cut out the high fructose corn syrup. And the other thing with that is the National Independent Black Parent Association. We need a chapter in Wolverhampton, Brixton, Bristol, you understand, Birmingham, right here in Manchester. If you're interested in joining that, get with me. Add me on WhatsApp. My phone number is area code. Y'all should have been ready. Phone number is 215, area code 215-989-9858. One more time. Of course, you got to add the country code. 215-989-9858. And also want to invite you guys on the Pan-African cruise this summer. Haiti, Jamaica, and Mexico, July 2016.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Now, trust me, we have to end the questioning here. I have just been told that by the organizer. So, thank you. There will be no more questions. I am going to, 5 o'clock tomorrow, more of Dr. Umar Johnson.
5 o'clock tomorrow.
Hold on, please. No, right, hold on, please. We're not finished. I'm going to hand over for the final processes to our sister here.
Thank you everyone for persevering. I just want to sum up very, very quickly this second day of our 3-day conference, and we are going to cut the most amazing cake that we have, tribute cake there. Yes. No, it's a real cake. So I think we've had a really inspirational day. I want to thank all of our speakers, everybody behind the scenes who have been working tirelessly throughout the last few months to make this happen and during today. And I want to thank Colette and all of the organisers, but also every single one of you here and all of the contributions that we heard from the floor. Just to say that we haven't finished the conference, there's another day tomorrow, and we have some amazing speakers tomorrow. The venue is a different venue. So if you're coming tomorrow, it's at the Brooks building of the Manchester Metropolitan University, and registration starts at 10 a.m. for a 10:30 start. You'll be hearing from Murray on climate change and justice. You'll be hearing from Khadija George on women and Pan-Africanism. And you'll be hearing from the great Akala, who probably needs no description of who he is and what he does. So please join us tomorrow. I've been told that I have to put the first cut in this cake. And I'm not sure where to cut it from, so I'm going to go around.
You have a knife?
I've got a knife. It's not a dangerous one. I've got a knife, so I won't do any damage to anybody but the cake. And just to end, before I cut the cake, a round of applause for everybody.